Today I'm going to demonstrate how to make the doll body. Before you start the doll body, you need to select your fabric. I suggest that you choose a cotton fabric that isn't too thin, because you don't want to be able to see through it too much, but you also want a fabric that is fairly smooth. When you go to paint the faces on, if the fabric isn't a little bit smooth, it's a lot harder to get a smooth eye. So make sure that the fabric is rather smooth. To cut your fabric, it's easier to tear the fabric than it is to cut it, because it tears straight and you can't always cut straight. So if you'll take your fabric and on the selvage edge, if you will clip into your selvages about 12 inches apart and then tear your fabric down these strips, then that will give you the size that you need. You will need to use a double layer of fabric, so you can line up your fabric edges, make sure that everything's lined up. Some people may like to use a few pins to keep the fabric together, depending on how many dolls you are going to be making at one time. It might be helpful to use a few pins, but it's certainly not necessary. Before you trace the pattern, you might want to take the pattern that you find on our website, and you might want to attach the pattern to a piece of tag board that stiffens it, and glue it on or trace the pattern onto the tag board. Either way, cut it out and then use that as a template, because you can't trace around a piece of paper very easily, but you can trace around something that's a little stiffer. Okay, to begin tracing it, I always like to start right where the dots are for the opening. Put this right close to the edges. Make sure you have room on the top and the bottom. Start at the dot and trace all the way around. You might have to try a couple of different kinds of pencils to see what works for you. Sometimes a pencil that is too sharp gets hung up in the fibers of the fabric, so sometimes a number 2 pencil works a little bit better. Trace all the way around, ending at the dots again. And that where you're ending here is going to be the opening for your stuffing. I like to make a little mark that comes out to the side here, like that, so that reminds me that that's where that stuffing is going to be. Now, so because we have it like this, we will actually have the front and the back of the doll together, because we have 2 layers of fabric. Now, if you are going to do more than one doll, to save fabric, actually flip the doll around, the doll pattern around, and do the same thing. Again, leaving room for that strip, that piece that goes around like that. Then trace the doll. Like that. Then again, if you do another one, just keep doing the same thing until you've used up all of your fabric. You should be able to get 3 dolls per 12 inches by 44 inch strips and 9 dolls per yard. The next step is sewing the doll body. Now, please remember, you sew before you cut. That is so very important. Do not cut the doll pattern out yet. You will sew first. Now, if you're going to be doing several dolls rather than just one, then it's easier if you take the end of your fabric and roll it up to keep it out of the way as you're sewing. You will then start right at the edge of the opening, closest to you, and you're going to do a 1/4 inch seam. Lower your presser foot and begin sewing. You'll notice also that I have pinned this because I don't want it slipping around as I'm sewing. Sew 3 or 4 stitches and back stitch. Whoops. And then continue forward. You also want a very tiny stitch, about 1.5. The reason for that is that if the stitches are really tiny, and when you're stuffing the stuffing in, they're more likely to hold. If the stitches are too big, you just might accidentally break the threads. Sometimes you have to lift the presser foot a little bit just to move it, and that's okay. Sometimes that fabric gets in the way, you just have to move it. When you get to the other end of the opening, then you will reverse the back stitch. Once you have sewn all of the dolls in the strip, then you're ready to cut them out. Remember, sew first, cut after. Now remember, you should have backstitch on both edges of the opening. Now you've got the dark line where you traced, that is your cutting line. When you cut it out, you want to cut pretty much on that line. If your line's a little bit dark, then you want to be sure that you cut that line away. Because if the dark line shows, when you turn this right side out and stuff the dolls, then sometimes you can see the dark line through the fabric. So be sure that that dark line is cut away. If you're doing more than one doll, get them all cut out at once before you go on to the next step. Once you have finished cutting, you're ready to clip your curves. If you don't clip into the curves, when you turn it right side out, it will be all bunched up, and you'll wonder why. And the reason is because you did not clip into the curves. When clipping into the curves, you need some nice sharp pointed scissors. You will clip into your stitching, but not through it. You have to be careful. 2 or 3 clips into the curve. You'll do that on every curve. Once your doll body is sewn and the curves are clipped, you're ready to turn it right side out. To do that, you go to the opening that you left and start with either the legs or the arms, and you're going to turn it right side out. If you need something like a stick or a wooden spoon or something to help you push it through, then feel free to use that. Just kind of tuck in the ends and stuff them through. Bring them through the opening. So I did the legs first. Now I'm going to do the arms, and I do the one that's farthest away first because it'll be the hardest to get through. Tuck it in. Kind of hard to do sometimes. Oops. Reach in and get hold of it and pull it through. Then to the other arm. Sometimes it helps if you get a finger inside to separate your pieces of fabric. And the last thing I'll tuck in is the head. Work out all the edges as best you can. At this point, if you have a little stick or wooden spoon or something, you can stick in and really push all of the edges all the way through. At this point, check all of your curves. They should be nice and smooth, and actually finger press them. Use your fingernail or fingers and just kind of press those flat. If you sewed it correctly and clipped those curves, they should lay nice and flat. Now we'll move to the ironing board to press it. Once the doll is pressed, you're ready to stuff it. Now there's all kinds of stuffing that you can use. You can buy bags of it. You can open up a pillow. You can find stuffing lots of ways. Right here what I have is some quilt batting that I'm just going to tear up into little pieces. You don't want to just take a whole big chunk of it and start stuffing it in. Otherwise the doll will look all lumpy and not look good. So you want to tear off little pieces to do this. Then where the opening is in the doll, you're going to start stuffing. I like to start with the legs. And you take a piece of stuffing, stuff it all the way down. If you have long fingers like I do that reach all the way to the end, that's great. If they don't, get a wooden spoon or a pencil or something that you can push it all the way down. And you want to push it firmly down so that there are no wrinkles in the edges. It takes a lot of stuffing to do this. You want it nice and firm. You can't stuff it too tight. You just can't. So just when you think that it's full enough, stuff it more. Being sure to push it all the way down as far as you can. one leg about finished, go to the next one. Do the same thing. Again, all the way to the very end so that there's no wrinkles. Once the legs are about full, go ahead and do the arms. Again, pushing it all the way to the end so there's no wrinkles. And the other arm. So once you've got both legs and both arms stuffed, then go to the head. It's especially important that the head be really full. We don't want it round, but we want it nice and firm. Clear out to the edges. Keep pushing it up all the way to the top. Now you're just going to continue stuffing the rest of the body. Again, pushing it up as tight as you can, and when you think it's finished, stuff it some more, because I guarantee it won't be tight enough. We want absolutely no wrinkles in the neck area, no floppy heads. Add some more into the arms here if you need to, because we don't want them to bend either. Takes a lot more stuffing than you think it will. You can add some more to the legs. Just keep stuffing till the entire body is firm and full, with no or very few wrinkles. Once the doll is completely stuffed, it should look like this. Notice especially that there are no wrinkles in the neck, it's nice and firm, no wrinkles in the hands and feet, and that it's full, clear out to the edges, and flat. It should look just like that. The next thing we will do is to sew up the side. Now you might find that it's easier to put some pins in to hold those seams together. You don't have to, but that just seems to be helpful sometimes. Get a needle and thread. Put a knot in the end, start sewing at one of the ends, pull it through. You're going to do a slip stitch. You can pull your knot through so it's on the inside, and then just continue sewing until it's sewed completely closed. Little tiny stitches. You don't want them to be great big stitches. You want them close together. You don't want any big gaps. If you get a knot in your thread, just pull it through. If your pins get in the way, just take them out. Be sure you catch both sides of the seam. Continue doing that all the way up until the seam is completely sewn together. If your stitches aren't perfect, that's okay, because they're going to be covered by clothes. You just want them to be nice and secure. You get to the end, make a knot, take a stitch, go back through your loop and back through the other loop, pull it tight. Now to hide the end of your thread, just take it through the body somewhere, come out, hide it inside, take your scissors, cut the thread off, trim your first thread, and it's sewn up. That's all.